Choral music was the music genre for the early church. The composers wrote about creation, the birth of Christ, and the resurrection.
Behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. In a moment, in a twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet.
Even though that has not largely changed, this style of music has become more useful in other spheres of our national and private life. My name is Ernest Minu, and in this documentary, I trace the history of choral music in Ghana, highlights the contribution of some of Ghana's finest composers, and also place the spotlight on those who are helping to preserve and promote what I call indigenous choral music. People have been singing together for as long as the world has kept recorded history. Western choral music, as we know it today, was birthed from sacred music. Most churches use Gregorian chants. Hearing monks singing in unison or blending their voices was commonplace in the early church. As music composition developed, the use of different tones began to be common. The breadth and depth of music heard in the church increased. The challenge, however, was that women were not allowed to sing in church. This meant that composers had to find a way of getting male singers to sing in the range they composed. Here's what happened. Many composers turned to the high soprano sounds of young boys who were able to sing the treble lines. Today, however, there are four main parts you find in a choir. The soprano, the alto,
The perception in those days was when you were not so good a soprano singer, then they push you to alto. But with the kind of music people are writing these days and the kind of repertoire we are being exposed to, it's no joke being an alto singer, because it took the same strength, the same techniques to be able to stay on top as an alto singer. So it's not a pushover part. Alto is like cooking porridge and sprinkling sugar in it. It's the sweetener of the music. It's when you take alto out of music, it has the feel. Okay, it's like building a house and painting it. It's the beauty of the music. When you take alto out of music, it doesn't make sense.
Tenor.
The tenor and the altos are just meant to embellish the main part, which is the bass and the soprano. So tenor is just there to embellish the voice of the soprano and the bassist. That's basically the role of the tenor. Tenor has to do with more of a natural voice. There's not really pressure on the tenor voice. Tenor, anybody can do tenor, as compared to alto, whereby you have a particular technique, you have to use bass, a particular technique, soprano. But so tenor, if a woman can do tenor, a man can do tenor.
And bass.
I started singing with the Winnipeg Youth Choir. It was way back in the early 2000s. Yeah, so, and from there, in fact, when I joined, I went straight to bass. If you ask me what it takes to sing bass, I would say you just have to train for it.
So are you saying that I can train and sing bass? It doesn't matter the texture of my voice.
Great. First of all, the voice texture is part, and then also the color of the voice. Okay, if your voice is deeper and dark, then of course naturally we expect you to sing bass.
I didn't know voices are colors. Choral music has over the years reflected changes in our society. In England, for instance, choral music has been a huge part of the monarchy. The music composed sometimes at the instance of the monarch expressed the times and seasons of the kingdom, from William I to Elizabeth II. Within the church, the Wesley brothers, John and Charles Wesley, hugely influenced the genre. It has been said that Wesley hymns, clothed in the flesh and blood of Christ, helped converts to easily grasp and embrace their faith and, if necessary, even die for it. The kind of music introduced into the educational system was purely Western. Students were taught to write compositions and sing in typical Western fashion. But Ghana will soon grow out of this. The revolution started with a 20th century man called Ephraim. For him, music produced by the Ghanaian must be indigenous, reflect the tradition and culture of his people. In 1927, inspired by the contents of a journal published by the West African Student Union WASU, Amu decided that he would not wear warm and suitable European clothes in tropical Africa. He made efforts to make the Christian church service more meaningful to African worshippers who are ashamed of their African clothing, language, music, and even their African names. As part of his ingenuity and creativity, Amo introduced bamboo flutes, popularly known as atentembeng. In 1931, after Amu was reprimanded by the church court for wearing his African attire to preach on a Sunday, Reverend Peter Hall told Amu, "We were taken aback to see you conduct Sunday service in a native cloth. We hope you will not do this again." After this encounter, Amu took leave of the church session but decided in his heart to continue to work in the church as a catechist and music teacher rather than a preacher. He didn't want to be compelled to wear European clothes. Amu composed several music pieces, among them Fare Thee Well, Mawu Dona Yesu, Nkwaje Njom, Israel Hene, Yanum Ebibriman. However, of his many compositions, Yanara Assassini has become a nationally acclaimed patriotic song that is performed at national functions.
Choral music as it is one of the most beautiful pieces of music that you can find. And so just listening to it, the melody, the harmony that comes with it, it's a joy. Ours is to evoke patriotism because it is patriotism that really drives nation building. And that is exactly what choral music does. Listen to the words of any choral piece in Ghana, and if it doesn't evoke a certain sense of passion and of pride and just being that feel-good factor about being Ghanaian, then I don't know what can do that for you. And so for NCC, when we engage in the citizenry, wherever we have the opportunity to play music, choral music is what we play because we believe it begins to sensitize us by evoking that spirit of patriotism in you and driving us to understand the role that each and every one of us has to play in building our nation. If you don't have love for nation, you would not have love for building nation. So choral music is really at the core of building patriotism in us as a people, and also ensuring that patriotism drives development, it drives nation building, it drives our oneness as a country. And that for me is the beauty of choral music.
Having admired and learnt at the feet of Ephraim Amu, Emeritus Professor Nketia continued the process of indigenizing choral music. Professor Ken Kafui describes him and the composers of his time as the second generation of African music composers.
And when he started this, Professor Nketia also wanted to learn from him. And Dr. Amu directed him to go and do the research as he also did to be able to compose it. So Nketia also went into research and even did a lot of research. Then in my estimation, the second generation is the students of Amu, because Amu taught them also these techniques and they also started using it, like Professor N.Z. Nayo, the late Nayo, Geoffrey Boateng, Ata Anand Mensah, Papo Thompson, who is a Ghana composer, Mr. Graves, there was one Graves who was in his class, Dosu, JMT Dosu, Arise Ghana Youth for your country. He also composed a song, Pia Ko, Pia Ko, Pia Ko, Yumoka Ko, Yoke Pia. That's the African art thing. They all learned from Amu. They were all students of Amu, the first students of Amu. So they also continued this.
Around this time, young Ken Kafui had also started writing and composing music, blazing the trail. Arguably, his most popular composition, Midakpe Namawu, was first performed at the Achimota School where he was a music teacher.
In Achimota follows King College's procedure. Nothing is announced. You only look at your program, you know the next piece, the conductor, the composer's name is also there. So in 1989, I started composing for the first one. That's when I composed Midakpe, da 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 da. And there is always a little history about that. When I composed the music and I was teaching the choir, they said, oh, the language is too difficult. No, Mr. Kafi. So if I asked them to come for the answers, some of them were not coming. But 6 people learned the song. And when the others heard it, they all rushed. Mr. Kafi, please, the song is so beautiful. We all learned it. They learned it. Then they said, Mr. Kafi, are we going to perform this for the festival? I said, no, because of what you did. Oh, my students were very sad. They all came to apologize. So we sang Midakpe for the first time in Achimota School. The following year, I composed Kafui. Ta ta da da ta ta. The National Orchestra and the choir also performed it. Then the next year, the 3rd year, I composed Jijong. And every year I composed something, and the Agri Chapokwa sang them.
Also within that period, his counterpart in the central region, Professor Sechibedu, saturated the system with beautiful tunes including Nyame Yakese and Asidanina Yawode.
I think Angel Sam Kese did beyond what all the others had done before.
Okay, Angel Sam Kese. Oh, you composed that song as well?
1989.
And I understand Asida Yahode as well as your song?
Yes.
Asida Nina Yahode.
That's 1984, 94, 95. Yes.
I see. So, do you have count of the number of compositions you've done?
I know it's around 750.
750 songs, yes, to your credit.
Yes.
In over 30, in about 38 years.
Yeah.
How do you do this now?
Okay, my father was a chorister and he could teach hymns.
Okay.
My mother was a chorister too. Before I went to the choir, my younger sister was in the choir. And I have a cousin, Nunkum Sechi, who wrote, he was teaching songs at the time. But I think that mine would have been a combination of several factors. I didn't do music in school, but I think just the will and the desire of God.
Which is a curious thing, because when I know you're a professor, I thought you were a professor of music, but apparently you're a professor of English.
Yes.
So the music is a side thing.
Yes.
So how did it all start?
I went to the choir. I was inspired by my SDA friend singing bass, and I was inspired to join the choir. I loved music. I loved to hear the sound of the organ, but I wasn't into choir, because I went to student school at 12, and so you were almost out of those. Until we decided that, okay, Form 3 vacation, I'll go to school, I joined the choir. And when I said I was going to sing bass, they started laughing at me because I was a 15-year-old boy, but I wanted to sing bass. But I did bass, and I went for a conference in 1981 at Koforidua, and saw people composing and teaching songs, and it inspired me. So I went, that was in July, and by August, I started composing. I started with a few things. As to how it became, I cannot use my human analysis to explain why it became. The only thing I can say is that it's God who had determined that I'll be a composer, I'll be a musician, and He made it be as He has a word, as His will.
So, Prof, you're saying that you had no sort of formal training whatsoever?
Apart from learning the names of lines and spaces in school, secondary school, and the G clef and F clef.
Basic music.
Which everybody does in secondary school. Yes, which I did. But as to learning to harmonize, learning to orchestrate, learning to do all the things I do and to conduct well, by observing and by reading, and yes, and beyond that is by the divine providence.
So you basically taught yourself to do music?
Sure. To play the organ, yes. To compose, yes. Harmonize, yes. To work in staff, yes. Yeah.
But choral music began to suffer. Ken Kafui says the removal of music from the school curriculum was a major factor.
See, one problem is that formerly music was, a lot of schools studied music. But some time ago, in the, I think in the 80s, late 80s, when the SSS program started, they stopped music. It was no more compulsory. It was just an elective, even up to now. So that there are a lot of talents people who have the talent of music, yet they have to go and study science or something else. So that is number one. The appreciation also came down because schools were not studying music. Now, number two is that government doesn't see any economic importance of music in Ghana, whereas a lot of countries make money from music. And then the other thing is that our copyright recognition, it was the Musiga. I think they did their best, but it should have been the country should have protected our works, but it became an individual kind of thing. So our works are not protected, and that's the problem we have. For example, if you take football, the country spends so much money on football. If government wants to spend money on music, they will not spend even a quarter of what they spend on football, but gain more money.
It was at this point that the formation of youth choirs gave some life to the genre. In 1988, the Ebenezer Methodist Church in Winneba, now the Ebenezer Cathedral, started a juvenile choir called Methodist Junior Choir. The responsibility of nurturing the choir was put under the tutelage of George Mensah Esirfi, with the assistance of Francis Arthur Yamwa, popularly known as Pa John, the current director and conductor of the Winneba Youth Choir. The main aim for establishing the choir was to prepare the youth to take over the mantle of singing from the adults in their old age, but also complement their performances when the need arises. In 1997, unexpectedly, however, about 90% of the membership of the Methodist Junior Choir Winneba broke away to start a youth choir. The then director of the junior choir, Francis Arthur Yamwa, assisted by Edwin Artagani, the organist, and His Excellency Ko Inkansa Aka III, pioneered the registration of the group as a non-profit-making association independent of the church.
Winneba Youth Choir did very well. They did very well in making us see music as a serious business. The other ones were for pleasure. The Joyful Way Singers did very well at the time in the 80s and 90s, did very well. But currently, the biggest push has been the Winneba Youth Choir, which made it pseudo business. And with the structure and with invitation here and there and going, they made it. And I wish to say that all the choirs which have come have taken directly or indirectly from the Winneba Youth Choir. It's been a formidable experience, and I think that my brother Mensa Sifi needs to be, who was a founder, needs to be commended for that. And Pa John also needs to be for holding the fort to ensure that the choir has grown and has given the influence. So it did very well, popularizing our local pieces and making us know that the African choir can also do some great things here in Africa and even in Europe where they toured.
The Winneba Youth Choir has produced several albums in various choral musical genres which are played all over Ghana, Africa and the world at various occasions. They have served as a model to many existing and upcoming choirs with musical performances enjoyed by the masses. This is Winneba, a town formerly or traditionally known as Efutu, but the Portuguese who settled here many years ago christened it Winneba because of its windy beaches. Now, apart from the Abuatri festival that is popularly known for, this town also has a rich musical background. It has produced some of Ghana's best composers. Talk of E.W. Professor Sechibedu, and call him the future of choral music, and you won't be wrong, James Varikama. We have come to explore.